The Millennium Era was sure funky in a lot of different ways, especially with constant reboot to reboot to reboot, but here we have the rare example and the only example of that era when there was a sequel. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Matthew, and today we're back with another figure comparison, this time between my favorite duo of NECA and MonsterArts. Today we have a comparison between the 2002 Godzilla from Godzilla Against MechaGodzilla from MonsterArts and the 2003 Godzilla from Tokyo S.O.S from NECA Toys. Now, for you longtime viewers of the channel, you might have remembered a few months ago I did this exact video where I pit this guy against this guy and kind of came to a conclusion about which one was better and really kind of narrowed down the differences between the two figures. Yes, I did do that. However, big asterisk here, that was not filmed very well. That was filmed using this I don't want to say piece of crap because it's done a lot of wonders for me. My old phone, which is an LG, and basically that can only film up to a certain quality. Also doesn't help that I lost my freaking camera lens because I had in my bag and somehow that little circular thing actually was lost. So I want to kind of go back to the drawing board here and refilm the whole thing with my thoughts, which because I have a bit more to say about these two than what meets the eye. And I personally feel like I wasn't giving the figures a fair shot because I kind of had my personal bias in the way, because I do like NECA more so than MonsterArts because I have more of a nostalgic connection with NECA. I mean, it was my first figure line, so I think I kind of gave this guy a bit too much slack, this guy not enough. So with that said, we're going to take a equal grounds look in 2025 in higher quality. You can literally check the video quality right now. It should say 1080p. If it's not, crank that bad boy up and enjoy the ride. And we're going to take a bit of a more deep dive into both figures as to which one I personally think, well, not just what I personally think, but what is overall executed as the, technically speaking, better figure. Now, technically, again, so to speak, these are going to be different designs of Godzilla. I say that in quotations because base on base, they're pretty much the same. Like, again, they're effectively the same wolf-like face Godzilla that looks like the 2000 Godzilla, just colored more traditionally, has the upright, hands to the side posture we all know and love with the whipped tail, the crystal-like spikes, yada, yada, yada. And the really only big difference is that one had the scar, one doesn't. And again, one came from the original film, one came from the sequel. But effectively, they are the same identical design. So we're not going to be judging specifically based off movie accuracy, but which one does it better as far as the sheer quality of it goes. As well as, like, if you want to know what I'm trying to get at here, let's take a good comparison. Because, I mean, that's the whole point of this video. You can skip ahead to the actual figure part. Godzilla 2014 versus Godzilla Evolved. They're the same version of the character, just different designs of said incarnation. Much like Godzilla 1984 and Godzilla 1995, which was Burning Godzilla. Same incarnation of the character, just different designs of that character. Same continuity, different designs, different time periods. It's like, what, 10 years between the two nearly? I think I'll actually pass 10 years, 11 years, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So, time for the bout you guys came for, the NECA against the MonsterArts. So, we're also going to be, before we actually get into the nitty gritty of it, I should also mention that we're kind of subtracting on the actual rule set, because some of them don't really have to, I guess, make a difference. So we're going to kind of subtract some things like accessories. Neither of them come with anything. Availability, they're both at the mercy of the aftermarket these days, so they're not going to be too common to come across these days. So that's going to be as well. And packaging as well, I mean, they're both going to come in boxes, so really at that point, again, kind of came to my subjectivity, so I'm going to kind of subtract those rounds, and we're going to primarily go with these four. So, sculpt and paint. Originally, I was going to divide the two into, separate rounds, because sculpt can be really good sometimes, paint can not so much be. But as far as, the actual heads and torsos, like overall bodies are concerned, they both take very, very different approaches. The NECA is a lot more dirty looking and has a really nice wash of like almost like a tan over the head and the spines and the overall scales of the overall body. Sorry, I'm starting a little bit. While the MonsterArts does feature a very nice sculpt, all things considered, but doesn't really have much paint to bring out the details, even though the details do a wonderful job at talking already, because of its more flat color scheme. The NECA has a bit more of a glossy finish with its eyeball, because you can kind of see right here where it has a bit more of like a shiny finish with a bit of mascara, a bit of eyeliner around the eye. And again, something kind of similar to what they did with their 1964 Godzilla, where it's a lot more of a shiny finish, giving it a lot more of a, what do you say, more plasticky effect, because I think the eyes were made of plastic when they did the suits. Well, the MonsterArts uses decals and has, again, a bit of a more shiny finish. It's not as jarring as, say, the NECA version is, but at the same time does do a wonderful job at like actually giving this guy the full treatment, as you'd say. I will say the eyes, like as far as the details are concerned, the MonsterArts definitely has the edge here because they are decals versus actual paint, which can be a little bit more tricky to do versus a decal, which I think it's like printed. The decal here has a black pupil, the the yellow iris, and the kind of like eggshell white-ish, grayish. I'm struggling with my words here. The eyeball itself. And as again, for my personal preference, I definitely think the MonsterArts definitely has a bit of the edge there. As far as like the teeth goes, neither of them are done like absolutely like slobber knocker out of the park. The MonsterArts teeth are going to be individually sculpted and painted to varying amounts of degree, because we have some teeth which are pretty well painted, some of them that are not so much, because like that one, they're all conjointed right there. And it's definitely a lot more of a, I guess you could say, shriveled up looking mouth, versus the NECA, where it looks a lot more uniform and has a different color scheme. This one has a bit more of like a beigeish type color with a more maroon saturated red, versus this one where it looks more like a blood red and more white-ish teeth. So that is worth something to point out. The actual neck pieces on both figures, the NECA has a bit more paint on it, while the MonsterArts has a bit more detail overall to be found on it. Something like the actual designs of the arms. The arms on both figures are definitely done quite differently here. Both of them feature the standard bumps and grooves as you would naturally get. But the NECA has a lot more of the dry brushing to bring out its details versus the MonsterArts. NECA, okay, there we go. Versus the MonsterArts, where it has a bit less paint, but it has, again, more of like that matte finish, so it lets its detail do the talking. The claws on the MonsterArts are going to be iffily painted because they are kind of more blatant towards out on the base, while the NECA's application is more solid and streamlined. It knows where to cut off at the right time, so I will say NECA does kind of win that advantage. But as far as the actual paint goes on it, the MonsterArts definitely has the edge here, because the NECA's is just kind of one note versus the MonsterArts, where it actually has a bit of a gradient here. So going to the actual dorsal plates, the dorsal plates here are two different stories. The MonsterArts here have a bit more of like a gradient going on as far as like the gray to white, and it looks very clean, very crisp, and it has proportionally smaller dorsal fins in comparison to its rival, but also has a dry brush over top of it. I feel like the whole figure could really use it, although again, it does kind of speak for itself. Versus the NECA, where it does attempt to do like a gradient or some sort of shading, but primarily has the wash of like the more whitish tips that do the talking, versus the base of it, which is going to be more on the gray side. The chests on both figures, no really overall favors to either figure, because, well, actually quite a bit of favors, I should add, because the NECA does have the scar, which is going to be glossed over with a purplish brown color. And this one obviously does not have the scar, but the MonsterArts does have the very, very sharp details. Like if I point my finger on them, they feel pretty even, but the MonsterArts definitely looks a bit more detailed. But the NECA kind of evens out the scaling again with that dry brushing, which really pulls into effect here. I think the dry brushing was a really good choice on NECA's part. Going to the big, meaty legs on both figures, which is funny because the 2002 had relatively slimmer legs. Not really slimmer legs, but just slim-ish legs. The NECA is a lot more bulky, of course, but the MonsterArts is a lot more slimmed down. Again, with all the details here. The MonsterArts, again, has a bit more defined detail, but as far as like sheer amount of it, they're pretty even because of NECA's dry brush, which brings it out a lot more. The actual feet, I'm going to say, despite NECA's dry brush, I think the MonsterArts is just the overall better executed feet because of its superior detail and claw shading versus NECA's more one-note claw shading and more shallow details, plus it has a lot more bigger, bulky feet, which the thing is, the 2002 design, or 2003 for that matter, never really had big, bulky feet. It just had more elongated feet like this. This, I can kind of see what they were going for, but it's definitely clear which company did it better. And as far as the tails are concerned, the MonsterArts tail is very slender, very nicely done. All the individual segments when it comes to the crystal-like spines here. As you can see, painted and sculpted all the way down. All the gradients with the dry brush, as well as you can see. And the MonsterArts, as you can see, has a lot more of that detail work. And the NECA, wrong figure company, has a lot of that detail work here, as well, starting from here, which is actually pretty pointy, all the way down, the individual segments. Everything here is basically dry brushed, which I do appreciate, and you can clearly see where the tail does kind of tip, or at least stop the paint. So when you really settle both figures down for a basic glance, one-on-one, who takes the edge? Well, let's kind of back up here. You could literally divide this category into like micro categories. What I mean by that is which figure has the better head sculpt, which figure has the better arm sculpt, tail sculpt, spine sculpt, paint application on this part of the body versus that part of the body, and so on and so forth. But let's really kind of look at the big picture here. The MonsterArts has the better sculpt. I don't know why I voice cracked there. The better sculpt. No doubt about that. The NECA is very detailed in its own right. For what was a $25 figure, I would say that this was hard to beat. Like, I could rub my finger on this and like feel pretty much every nook and cranny. And it was clear that the sculptor of the 2003 Godzilla had a lot to work with and did very well. Like, again, this was during NECA's heyday, during when they were producing some amazing Godzilla figures, more towards like the tail end of their Godzilla figure line, which please come back, NECA. But the MonsterArts was sculpted, I think, by Yuji Sakai, who's like a Godzilla veteran in the figure and like design. He even worked on a few of the Godzilla films, which is incredible. But that said, between the two of them, yes, the MonsterArts does have the better sculpt. But I would say the NECA has the better paint application because of the sheer amount. Claw paint, yes, the MonsterArts does technically have the better paint as far as like the gradients and the shading goes, but the NECA has the better application of said paint. It knows where to stop on the claws. It's added a lot more of it when it comes to like the dry brushing on the body to bring out some of the finer details, and the dorsal plates where it gets more of like the shading and such, versus this one where I would say, as far as like the sheer colors, I definitely prefer the MonsterArts dorsal plates to the NECA dorsal plates. But another thing is also just the structural integrity of these things, which is going to play in articulation, so we're going to kind of hold off on that. But in my personal opinion, it's super close. But the sculpt on the MonsterArts is super good, but the paint on the NECA really kind of gets it a little going. So I'm going to have to call this one an equilibrium, which means it's high, by the way. Now, next up is going to be articulation. What's an articulated action figure without its movement? Well, let's see. First, because it came out first, the MonsterArts. The MonsterArts figure has a ball joint at the jaw, which can open about this far out. Yes, that is true. You can close this far in. And if you twist and turn it the right way, you can actually kind of get it to go side to side. It's unnecessary, but you can do that. We have a ball joint here at the head, ball joint here at the midsection of the neck, and a ball joint here at the lower portion of the neck. So you can get all three joints to look up, down, to the left, and to the right, centering the jaw, because that is one finicky jaw. And you can also swivel a bit. So personally, I love the way that this thing is engineered. Multi-segment, absolute awesome. What about the NECA? NECA opted to go for a more simpler but questionable approach. What do I mean? Well, for the jaw, unlike the MonsterArts, you can open the jaw on a hinge, but it also opens the same way, just except without the crookedness of the jaw. So you can pretty much do that. Something of note is that if you actually like jam it in too much and you need like your fingernail to like pry it open, yeah, it can get a little finicky. When I opened it, if I remember correctly, I did need to jam my fingernail quite in there in order to actually get it out, so there is a possibility of that. For the head, singular peg here, we have a ball joint here which will allow you to go full 360, a little bit up like this, a little bit down like that, and can go from side to side. And then there's really no neck joint, but there is. Huh? Okay, so usually standard on the NECA Godzilla, I'm trying to look for one in close proximity of myself. Let's just go with this one, the reactor level. Usually they'd follow this format: hinge at the jaw, ball joint at the head, ball joint at the neck. Okay, cool. So that'll allow you to get a rotation. Pretty standard stuff there. Try to put them back on the shelf. What did NECA do here? Instead of sculpting just here or cutting the sculpt here to make the neck joint, they decided to go all the way down here to the top of the shoulders where it meets the, like, where would be the collarbone, and have a whole joint that basically cuts the whole figure from the bust up, almost like where you get your picture taken if you were arrested. And you can get a fair amount of movement. You can get a little side to side, down and up, and it is kind of made of more flexible plastic, so you won't have to like worry about a ton of scuffage. I mean, I would still be cautious about that, but really, this is how it's supposed to move, but it kind of breaks the sculpt, which is why for the section of the head, I'm going to have to give this one to the MonsterArts, because they could have done something like this, in my personal opinion. That would have looked way better. But anyways, for the shoulders, I'm going to have to use this shoulder because that bicep loves to pop off on me. The shoulder here can move a full 360 degrees. Bicep, well, it can go out, in. Bicep can rotate as well. Hinge at the elbow, which is going to be a double hinge. And this wrist loves to pop off on me. I mean, even at the slightest touch, so it's really like the GMK. But you can get a rotation out of it. Not too much 360, but there isn't, like, it's like a dual joint, except you don't really get a whole lot of range out of that. The NECA has a much more simplistic approach, thankfully. You can go out about that far, in about that far, can rotate, I think, nearly a full 360 or so. Swivel hinge at the elbow, swivel hinge for the wrist, and hinge for the fingers. I think the NECA does kind of win the advantage here because it does offer a bit more range with the shoulders. For the actual ab crunch, MonsterArts can crunch this far back, this far forward, this far backwards, kind of rearing up, and can swivel using the two joints back and forth and can kind of lean side to side. NECAs can go forward about this far, backwards about this far, can rotate, and go side to side. So as far as the sheer range goes, they're a bit on the more even side, but the MonsterArts does have more joints to its advantage, while NECA just has the one basic barbell style joint. The actual hips, the MonsterArts can go way out to the side, can go in. Let's try this one. It can go pretty far up. Can it do a 360? Oh crap, nope. First time that happened. Okay. Watch as that's going to become a reoccurring issue now. I'll be right back. That did not take long, but I have a feeling that's going to become a bit of an issue now. So yeah, you can go pretty high up. Just literally pause to the moment before it like pops off on me. And as far as like backward motion, you can go pretty far back. So it's not like a 360, but it is pretty much close to one. In fact, if you were to like rotate this way, you probably could get it. Bend at the knee like this, there's going to be a double hinge, as well as a side to side. Swivel if you wanted to. Calf joint right here and a ball joint at the ankle, so you can go back and forth like that. And for the NECA, the hips don't lie and don't really go out to the side that often. Yeah, I was kind of surprised by this because you can, on past NECA Gojis, you could actually get the ankles to go like way out. Here, that almost feels like I'm about to like break the thing, so I'm not going to. Even though I have a spare, it's in box and I don't want to open it. For the knee, we have one singular, very tight knee joint. Let's try this side. I had this thing for like nearly 5 years, so I don't know why it's still... There you go. You can go back and forth like that. And a ball joint at the foot, which can go a little bit side to side, but primarily is going to act as a swivel. So for the actual leg on leg, I'm going to have to give the advantage here to the MonsterArts, just because it's a little bit more flexible, which is weird to say because NECA is usually the one to like master the leg joints. And now for the tails. The MonsterArts has all of these segments almost individually ball jointed. I think they really stopped like the individual ball joints up to here because there is double, 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 a double, double, double. And then from here to here, it's going to be kind of like sculpted at like a curve, but it is going to be entirely one sculpted piece. But aside from that, you can get a lot of organic poses. Like, look at this. Very whip-like tail. You can have it curling all the way back. Curl it like straight if you want to. Versus the NECA where instead of individual segments, we have actually a few at a time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 joints. Could be wrong. And from here to here is going to be bendy wire. So you can pretty much accomplish about the same level of poses as the MonsterArts, if not a little less. But for the actual like tails, I'm going to say the MonsterArts does win the advantage here because of the amount of joints that it uses. So let's go to a brief pose off and really show what these guys can do. So when we go to a pose off, I know what you're thinking. What the hell kind of pose is this? Well, this is just kind of like a pose that I feel like could help really like push the Godzilla figures, like all the joints on them, almost all of them, to really like showcase what they can do. So almost everything's bending. Both of their backs are like completely reared back. Their necks are as long and looking straight ahead as they can when they're in this pose. Legs are bent forward. The legs are spread out to the sides and their tails are all curled in to give like a maximum effect of what both figures can do. And when it comes to this pose alone, the MonsterArts looks a lot more organic than that of the NECA. And well, that's really just kind of putting it at that point. I'm not saying the MonsterArts wins because it can do this pose versus NECA where it can't. I'm saying as far as like the actual fluidity of these joints making them do poses, the MonsterArts is going to be the winner here. And not to mention, it just has a bit more joints than the NECA does. Sure, effectively, the NECA does kind of match the MonsterArts when it comes to the overall like placement of the joints, because there's head, neck, mouth, things like that. But what really kind of like negates the NECA from actually winning it is going to be pretty much the amount of joints. And a really good example of this is the tail. Let me get these guys into the standard position again. The MonsterArts has a lot more fluidity with its tail movement. Like, you can literally almost make it like organic and fluid in that aspect. No matter what pose you have this guy in, it doesn't really look that bad or that weird. Compare that to the NECA, where it does almost accomplish the same effect, but to varying amounts of degree. What I mean by this is, you see this like weird sun, like it kind of straightens out here, then it kind of curls back in again. Yeah, that's kind of the stuff I'm talking about. Not to mention, because it's not as segmented, because there's little pieces of sculpt here, that doesn't really help the NECA's case with its tail movement. So, as the advantage I can give to NECA here is that I would say it has the better joint tolerance. What I mean by that is, it's not going to pop out as frequently as something like the MonsterArts. Like, good example, hand. I can move this thing for days, won't pop out on me. This hand, just one twist. So at that point, yes, it becomes an issue, and I kind of do resent some Godzilla figures for that. But when you really settle it down, is that really an issue as far as like the amount that you're going to be posing this thing? It's just a matter of fluidity, and the MonsterArts absolutely clears NECA, so the winner is the S.H. MonsterArts in that category. So next up is going to be size. And effectively, yes, they're both in the 6 to 7 inch scale, but that really can change a lot of things. Let's talk about it. So NECA's scale was always more uniformed. Sure, some figures were bigger than others, but as far as the sheer scale is concerned, they were pretty much even, or they got progressively bigger over time. A good example of this would be the NECA 2014 Godzilla, which as far as scale goes, he was about this size. As time has went on, they've gotten progressively bigger. The 89 is much larger than that of the 94, and the 84. This guy is much larger than the 2001 Godzilla. So on and so forth, because those are earlier releases. I would make exceptions for things like the 54, where they did kind of jack up the size a bit, but that's kind of a whole different thing. But because of that, NECA also kind of doesn't work, well, the 2003 specifically, doesn't work with some other lines. That being the MonsterArts. I don't own the S.H. MonsterArts Kiryu, nor do I desire to at this moment because I have him, and I feel like a 6-inch MechaGodzilla works regardless because they can always kind of fudge the scales, kind of put him down, and yeah, boom, they work. Anyway, putting him in a neutral posture instead of being hunched, which is weird because Godzilla's known for being hunched. I would say, regardless of how you slice it, the MonsterArts is going to be more appropriately sized because it's a standard 6-inch figure. This figure, it almost seems like NECA wanted their Godzillas to scale with their Ultimates, which are about 8 inches tall as opposed to 6 inches. So they were almost quietly jacking up the size of their Godzilla figures as times went on. I mean, 89 is like freaking long. He's probably long as the camera will allow me to put him in. And their 2003 Godzilla ended up being their largest overall standard release Godzilla figure yet. The only Godzilla figure in NECA's history would be the 24-inch long Godzilla, but really neither of them work because they don't scale with that big guy. I'm joking about that, by the way. I mean, technically speaking, he would scale because he's about only 55 meters. He's about 125, more close there. Anyway, so as far as the sheer size goes, the MonsterArts just works well with more figures out there, giving MonsterArts the size advantage. So, final bout is going to be the overall price. Now, again, we're talking base MSRP from when they were released. So that means 2020 versus, I think, about 2017 or 18, somewhere around there. I think it's, again, my memory is a bit hazy, but at MSRP, this guy was about $89.99 on retail release, and I think $94.99. Again, this is brought to America, not just Japanese yen to American dollar. The reissue would have been $94, which is a bit ludicrous because he comes with basically nothing. It's just a more improved, I guess, version of that figure. Versus this one was actually $25. Yeah, NECA wins this no problem. It's just a matter of actually understanding that, again, it's from this guy's point of view versus this one's point of view. The NECA absolutely slams dunk the MonsterArts. So at their 4 rounds instead of the usual 7, I am going to crown the MonsterArts the winner of this comparison, primarily because it is going to be more articulated. It's going to be a bit better detailed, even though that's technically speaking part of it. The sculpt and paint round, which is in equilibrium, and it's going to be a bit better sized. The NECA is bigger and a bit more weirdly proportioned in things like the feet, but is going to have a much better price, at least back then, and is going to have the better overall paint job, at least in my opinion, and a better joint tolerance. But at the same time, the MonsterArts, as far as being an action figure, just checks a bit more boxes off than the NECA does, which is shocking for me to say, right? Yeah, usually I'm actually one to prefer the NECA over the MonsterArts, but again, this is a non-biased comparison here because both figures do something very well. This is almost like a cheaper alternative compared to this one, which, as far as like, yes, it's 2003 versus 2002, but again, they're effectively almost the same design of Godzilla, just except one has the scar, one doesn't. As for my personal opinion, yeah, I'm going to have to stick with NECA just because I do personally enjoy the bigger, bulky size of this guy over the more slimmed down and smaller Godzilla from MonsterArts. But again, I do enjoy these figures at the end of the day. And yeah, again, this isn't to say one figure's bad, one figure's good, one figure's objectively better than the other. Because again, in my objective opinion, the NECA is going to be the better figure. But as far as the quality is concerned, then the MonsterArts is going to be the better one. Anyway, that's all I have for this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, subscribe, and maybe watch the older one. Just kidding, don't. Just kidding, yes. Still public. I don't know. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out, everyone.